Welcome to Talking Tuesday. I'm your host, Fancy Quant, and today we're going to talk about education, but we're going to talk about this at a deeper, more interesting level, in the sense that we're just going to talk about my education. So a lot of people have been asking, Dimitri, why don't you talk more about yourself? To be honest with you, I don't really like talking about myself. I think it's a little odd. I do enjoy it when someone asks and they are actually interested and we can have a conversation one-on-one. So again, maybe like in a podcast setting or I don't know, somebody messages me, we go out for coffee. More than happy to talk about myself, but it's just weird talking about yourself to yourself on an audio that you're going to play for other people. I don't know. It's just kind of odd. It's just kind of weird. But let's just dive on in and talk about education. And let's specifically start laying some of the groundwork here for who I am and also what I'm doing. So for those of you that don't know me or don't know this channel very well, I work in quantitative finance. So essentially people hear that and they think, okay, you do analytics for finance, which is somewhat true. But what's not really true is I don't do finance. So it's hard to explain that to people. A business degree and a finance degree, which I have somewhat we'll talk about, is completely worthless for the most part. Yes, it adds value, it adds light, it helps with modeling problems. It doesn't add a lot of value though. So that's just part of this. I do a lot of math, I do a lot of stats, I do a lot of computer science. So programming all this in to get answers and solutions to complex financial problems. Probably the easiest problem to understand for someone not coming from the finance or quant side is making a loan, right? You need a loan. A bank needs to decide, are you a good risk, a bad risk? Everybody's a risk of some sorts. And so deciding how much risk you have is a crucial component of what rate I should give you, or perhaps your rate would be so high that I can't legally charge you. And so therefore I think you're too risky for our portfolio. There's all kinds of things like that you'd have to model. Adding in variables, doing math and stats, and then using computer science to implement that is going to be what's used to figure all that out. So anyways, my day job is quite technical, especially from where I came from. But let's just start diving into education here and talking a little bit about my past and kind of who I am and why I think a lot of quants or those aspiring to be quants, you're going to burn out too fast, too quick, and you're not going to have a fun and successful career. Because I think the mentality and kind of the goal behind finance is somewhat corrupted, and there's not a lot of discussion around what would make a good quant. And so those I think that are best fitted for quant finance end up not in the industry. So anyways, let's just dive on in here. I started out elementary school and public school. I did preschool, I did kindergarten through 6th grade at my elementary school, and the overall experience is pretty fun. At the time, I didn't enjoy it at all. I mean, I'm a young boy running around wanting to do, activities, sports, be outside. I grew up in middle-class family. My mom was a stay-at-home mom. So, for example, when I was in like preschool and kindergarten, I would do like the half day, and then I could come home and we'd go to the grocery store with my mom. We'd do some shopping, cool things like that. It kind of plays out, though, you'll see throughout my schooling and education, though. So one fun thing and fun fact here is my mom actually took me out of school. I believe it was like 7th grade, 8th grade. And it just snowed a bunch. School was starting. My mom's like, hey, there's a bunch of snow. No one's going to be out there sledding, so the snow's going to be perfect. Let's just skip school and go sledding. And so this is a rare occasion, but we had a blast. And we had some fun, going out and doing some things that other kids couldn't quite do because they just didn't have, a stay-at-home parent or someone that was willing to take them sledding and maybe skip school for the day or a half day or whatever. But I grew up in a quaint kind of little town. I grew up in Spokane, Washington, so Washington State up in the Pacific Northwest here. It's kind of a blue-collar town. I grew up in the wealthier side of town on the South Hill. And it was just a lot of fun and enjoyment, I think, as a kid. It was a safe environment. We lived, I think, like a mile from school. I think technically like 0.75 miles. And so it was nice to be able to walk to school. We'd walk back and forth, my sister and I. And elementary school was okay, right? I mean, looking back at it, I think it was a lot of fun. It was really entertaining. There's a lot to learn. So being young, I didn't really realize that like I was learning a lot and excited about it. But my big hobbies in elementary school were actually doing origami. So yes, I was that weird kid who was folding paper, I think like in third grade, and I ended up getting paid by a teacher later down the road to go to her church and actually teach. I think I was getting paid like 20 bucks an hour as a kid when I was, I don't know, I think it was like fourth, fifth grade, something like that. So kind of a cool experience. The education itself, I think was okay, but I think a lot of problems we have, at least in the US here, and in education in general, is what speed do you set the education at? Um, for me, I felt like I went through school, and if I tried really hard and I stressed myself out, you could get A's. But then I looked at it and like it's not worth my time. Like, what's the point if I get an A or I get a B plus? Like, it's close enough. I mean, there's not really much difference. And so I ended up not taking school, I guess, too seriously. But I was still a good student, still like a 3.5 student throughout undergrad, graduate school, elementary school, high school, all that. I was always like a B plus student, so nothing stellar, but also nothing that is like terrible. The only, I guess, real failure I had was in high school. I had PE, so physical education, and you had to wear a heart rate monitor, and I would run and I would do the activities with everybody else, and then for some reason my heart rate monitor would be lower than everybody's, and since I wasn't in the exercising range, they gave me a C. So I got my first C in high school in PE because essentially my heart rate was not high enough. Um, and that will lead me somewhat into my, I guess, we'll talk about junior high and high school. Uh, Junior high, I went seventh grade in public school. I had death threats in eighth grade through some bullying and some other issues. And I ended up essentially being homeschooled for almost the entire eighth grade. I went for a short period, had issues, and then was homeschooled. I enjoyed the homeschooling, but it was very different. It wasn't as structured as public school. So public school, right, you're going to have, you go to class from this time to this time, you do all these classes. My homeschooling was done through like a remote program where you would watch videos and tapes and you'd learn the material and then you would kind of take like exams and things. And then at the end of the year, you would actually do an exam to see how you were performing. I took the GRE. I took the GED. That's what I mean. I took the GED in eighth grade, and I'd already passed it. And my parents always joke, right? In my mind, I told my parents, like, I'm done with school. I took the GED in eighth grade. Like, I'm smart enough to graduate high school, essentially. Like, what's the point of putting in another 4 years? I don't enjoy the process of education and learning. I hated school. It's a waste of my time. I don't like the other kids I go to school with in general. Let's just call it a day. Like, wash my hands. Let's move on. My parents joke about it to this day, but yes, I did not like school at all. I think elementary school was enjoyable. Junior high, I absolutely hated. And then high school, I started in a public school my freshman year where I got my C in PE. The entire, I don't know, the vast majority of the curriculum from junior high and high school is complete nonsense. The teachers are vastly substandard, probably some of the worst educators and worst individuals I've ever met. Lack of education, lack of understanding. Essentially, they're just collecting paychecks. So, and I would like to point out a few people in this process. I had a science teacher who taught chemistry who was absolutely in love with chemistry and science. And he was the best science teacher I ever had, and he was at public school. But he was a rare, rare exception to that. Just truly amazing. A guy, I mean, I can't say enough about him. I had a similar teacher, again in science, interestingly enough, from junior high. But again, he was super excited because I think the job was new for him. So he didn't learn all of the science, the biology he was teaching. So learning how like the human body functions and operates and all that, he was super excited about it. And then he would come to class and tell us about like how amazing everything was. So those are the only two teachers. English teachers, the math teachers specifically, were complete trash. In public school, I had my math teacher. I was in like the advanced math class or whatever. The first day of class, he comes in and says, "Hey, I'm Professor so and so, and I'm an art teacher. Surprise! But they don't have a math teacher for this class, so I'm going to teach the math." He couldn't explain anything. Again, I passed the class. I think that was like an A. Huge waste of time. He didn't learn anything. The teacher was an idiot. Again, public schooling, when you start getting into like junior high and high school, I don't think public schooling does justice. And I should go back to elementary school here and talk briefly. I had some of the best teachers I could have ever asked for. Caring teachers, they spent the time with the students. One of my teachers, so Miss Anderson, shout out to Miss Anderson here. She was the Miss Frizzle, like the real world Miss Frizzle. So if you haven't seen the Magic School Bus TV show, she's the teacher on there. My class wasn't lucky enough, but she convinced somehow school boards and whatnot to fly her entire fourth grade class from Eastern Washington, in my hometown, to Seattle. And I don't even remember what they did over there, but she flew classes back and forth. So pretty crazy that she did that. She also taught us life skills that were useful instead of just worthless crap. So one thing that she did, which I absolutely loved, was she taught us how to read maps in fourth grade. So today it's not quite as useful because we have smartphones and all that. There was no smartphones when I was a kid. She taught us how to read a map. The school boards didn't like her as a teacher. They told us that essentially she was teaching things that were not necessary. Okay, reading a map is a necessary skill. It was not part of the curriculum. That was one of the sticking points. The other one is, since my mom was a stay-at-home mom, my mom worked with Miss Anderson, and she actually came in and taught cooking to fourth graders. And so a lot of these were focused around things that you could actually do that were beneficial to you. So you learned how to do like snacks. Like, okay, you're going to be home by yourself. Something simple like apples and peanut butter. So my mom would teach kids how to cut apples safely and then, put peanut butter on them. And then my mom would do more complex things. Like we would learn how to make fool's toffee. So for those of you that don't know, you melt like brown sugar and butter and you pour it over saltine crackers, and then you end up putting chocolate on top and then walnuts on top of that. And then you refrigerate it and you break it all up and it makes like a Christmas, I guess, treat or dessert. We did all kinds of cool stuff in that class. Again, Miss Anderson was the best teacher, the most exciting, the most innovative. She actually cared about the students and your well-being, which I feel like is something that's crucial for being a teacher. But again, elementary school was pretty good. I had a lot of fun. I learned quite a bit. I thought it was very well structured. But again, the junior high and the high school for public schooling was just trash. So now let's talk about my actual high school experience here. So actual high school, I went to private school my second half of my freshman year through senior year, and I graduated. I had all kinds of scandals going on through high school. Again, I'm not going to get into these as these aren't really education related, but high school so I went to Gonzaga Preparatory, so Gonzaga Prep. Those of you that know basketball, right? The big Gonzaga. Gonzaga Prep is the original Gonzaga. Gonzaga University was built after Gonzaga Preparatory. But at Prep, we had teachers that actually wanted to be there. So you paid money, quite a bit of money, to go to a private school. And from what I understood talking to some of the teachers, they mentioned that like I went to a public school, I taught there, I hated it, it was horrible. The kids don't care, the kids don't do homework, the parents aren't invested. So essentially they're like, I don't care that I'm making less money working at a private school. The environment and the students and the parents and everyone involved is just much more supportive, and it makes the process of being a teacher much better, and you have much more impact on your students. So private school is much more dedicated. I had, again, a mix of teachers, but the quality of teachers at the private school were far, far better than anything at the public schools. So there was a few exceptions, but for example, I had an English teacher. I'm not a big English fan. I thought it was kind of a boring topic, but one of my favorite teachers taught English. He made us do a bunch of different like famous, books and things we had to read. And just one of them that really stuck out to me was we did Romeo and Juliet. So again, somewhat famous, but he made us like act it out. And he was like a younger teacher at the time, and he was fun and excited and trying to figure out ways that it wasn't like you're just reading a book. You would read and you would interact with it. And we would do some acting in the class, which again, I'm not a huge fan of all this, but it was actually fun. So I give him credit for that. And we just had a lot of fun. So he made the topics more exciting. Again, I still hated school. It wasn't my most fun experience or anything. And then I should mention also my other teacher, who's no longer with us, but She taught me French, and the way that she taught French was that you were not allowed to speak any English in class unless you raised your hand and you had like some very specific reason that you would need to ask. But to speak English, you would have to ask in French if you could speak in English, and you'd have to somewhat explain it in French before you could ask your question in English. It seemed crazy at the time. It seemed unproductive. I learned far more French in her class than I had learned any other experience of foreign languages I'd had. Uh, my teacher had a really just fascinating history. Her parents ended up fleeing Europe. She lived all over Europe as they were fleeing different regimes and powers from the world. You can look through history and all that. But she was able to speak, well, I think it was like 20 languages or something crazy, and I didn't believe her at first. And then she taught Latin, she taught French, and then like our Spanish teacher would come in and she would speak fluently in Spanish with her. And I started talking to her more and more and getting to know her as a person and an individual, and started finding out that, again, she had this backstory where it's like she was forced to flee from country to country, her and her family, when she was a child. So she grew up speaking all these different languages because she kept getting shuffled around Europe. And then finally she came to America, and she ended up settling here. And I believe she had a PhD in like linguistics. And I should note that as well. So the private school, it's mandatory that you work towards a graduate degree in your field. So if you're going to be a teacher in math, you need to at least have a master's in mathematics. They will hire you with a bachelor's, but you have to be working towards your master's. So something I think is crucial. The teachers themselves need to be invested in education, wanting to be the best, wanting to understand things more deeply, not just going through the process of being a teacher and getting a teaching certificate. So anyways, that was my high school, junior high, elementary school in a nutshell here. The entire process, though, I can't complain too much. It was pretty enjoyable for most of it. During the time, I didn't think so. Again, I want to emphasize here, so a lot of you understand, I was not a nerd in the sense of school. Like, I didn't enjoy school. I wasn't the kid out there getting a 4.0 every week. I didn't think it was like this really easy process. It was just something that was mandatory, essentially. I had to do it. I had to go. I had a lot of snags. So again, I am a nerd. I'm very introverted as a person. Friends for me came and went. It was not like I had a core group of friends throughout my entire childhood. Things happened. People split. I think that's also another crucial point of education in life here, right? As you grow and change as a person, you're not always going to have the same friends around you. I do have a handful of friends that have stuck with me over the years, but at the same time, I was not the kid that was like super excited to go to high school and was the popular kid. I was the kid that was more concerned with racing motorcycles on the weekends. So yes, I raced motocross in high school and I think junior high. Like I mentioned before, I was huge into origami as a child. I was folding. You can ask my family. We have boxes and boxes of just crap that's folded. I ended up throwing out tons of it because I don't need it. But I really enjoyed learning and doing things with my hands. So I fixed all of my own motorcycles for racing, all the repairs and all that I did myself. And then I taught myself how to do that from essentially a necessity. And I've taught myself a bunch of skills. I've worked in a bunch of businesses. At the end of the day, though, I've realized I enjoy education and learning, and we'll talk about that here with college. So I started college, and I started out at BYU, Idaho, which was a huge mistake. I didn't even know if I wanted to go to college. So I graduated high school, and my parents were pushing me like, hey, are you applying for college? And I'm like, I don't know. I mean, I guess, sure. Like, that seems like the next step in the process here. I don't really know what I want to do with my life, right? I'm 17, 18 years old. I love to race motorcycles. That's really all I want to do. And so my parents were like, no, you got to at least apply. So my mom helped me put in applications, and I applied, and I got into BYUI. And the more I thought about it, I thought, okay, I want to be a plastic surgeon. I don't want to deal with sick people. I would like to do breast and face augmentation. So again, something where there's more money, something that's a little more technical, something where I can utilize my fine motor skills, so like my mechanic skills, my racing skills, right? Having those fine motor skills would probably make you a better surgeon. So I went into biology and I did a semester, like a summer semester early kickstart program for university, and I absolutely hated BYUI. Again, I had biology professors who were like the principals of junior highs who were completely clueless on what they were doing. And yes, they made mistakes in their exams. They wouldn't admit it. I hated it. I hated the entire process. I think BYUI as a whole was a joke of a university. Um, might be different than BYU as a bigger school, but BYUI, massive joke. Don't waste your time and money. I transferred back home to Washington State University, which is where my girlfriend at the time was going. And so just put a note on that. That girlfriend ends up being my wife. But we started dating in high school. Whole other story, not relevant to the education side. But my wife actually did help drive me and motivate me a little bit on the education side. My wife's a huge nerd. She's like the 4.0 student, honors in college. It's just who my wife is. But anyways, when I transferred to Washington State University, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. Again, I started watching, so when I was at BYUI, I was watching all these surgery videos and like watching when they like take the knife, right? And they start slicing the skin open and like some blood's coming out and like, I don't know, it's too graphic for me. I can't handle blood. I'm like, I don't know if I could adjust to it. Plastic surgery is not for me. So I ended up going to Washington State University and started on my generals. And my father at the time was running a business. I had been working with him since junior in high school. I was kind of dabbling and I was doing a lot of the manual labor for the business. I was doing some business stuff. And I thought, you know what? A finance degree would be a good option. I like doing the business tasks and being involved with the business. I like doing business in general. Finance seems like a more prestigious, exciting, and fun area of business than other areas. So I didn't want to end up in like a management degree or marketing or any of that stuff. And I took some accounting and I enjoyed the accounting, but I felt that it was, I don't know, too repetitive and too mundane of a job for me. So I ended up picking a finance degree and I hoped it was a right fit. I didn't really know. And I ended up going through my 4 years at Washington State University and getting my finance degree and technically my business degree with emphasis in finance. I also loved economics. So I ended up getting my economics minor. I really loved economics, but I couldn't see a clear path from an economic degree to a job. And I kept hearing people saying like, oh, you can use an economics degree to work in finance. And yet when I was talking to people in the industry, they kept saying that, a economics degree is interesting and it's useful, but we don't typically hire economics majors to end up doing finance. So I stuck with the finance degree and got the minor in economics. But in general, I really started enjoying school. I really enjoyed the process. It was nice to study things that I wanted to study. So for example, when you took generals, so in the US you're required to take all these general classes, you had to take a science class. I took geology. I loved geology. I thought it was just thrilling. The labs were fun. The class was fun. The professor was good. I also took environmental science. And again, the field trips were amazing. I lost a phone because I was wading in a river with like rubber boots on, and I took a step and ended up going in another couple feet. Phone got wet. Had no cell phone for a while. But I enjoyed it. I really liked being outside. I enjoyed the scientific rigor behind these science classes. For me, it was enjoyable. I took math again as an undergrad as it was required. It was like Calc 2, Calc 1, Calc 2. And it was a professor from another country. Her accent was so horrible I couldn't understand 90% of what she was saying. So again, I'm paying for more substandard math teachers because, I don't know, they just can't find good math teachers in the US for some reason. And so I'm like, this is dumb. It's great we learned math, whatever. I ended up taking a stats class, so business stats. So for those of you with stats backgrounds, you'll know a business stats class is somewhat of a joke. It's like an introduction to stats, but it's not, again, really taught very well. You learn like z-scores and normal distributions. Something I could probably teach you in a couple of weeks. We spent an entire semester on. But anyways, I was like, who the heck is going to be using stats? Like, who cares what the probability of something occurring is? Or, I don't know, you can measure some statistic on something. This is just dumb. And I remember telling a buddy of mine, like, this is the worst class. This makes no sense. It has no value. No legitimate business person's ever going to need this. And then I ended up going on and finishing out my finance degree. And again, I enjoyed the process more because I was invested. I had textbooks I could read through. The topics were relevant. I was working at a startup at the same time, so I could learn things on the job in accounting and finance and economics, and I could apply them in a real world setting to a real job. So for me, I think that's what made college so much more valuable, is that I had the job, I had the experience, and I could get the hands-on learning between the two. And so just to cover universities in general here, so Washington State University is like the second best university in Washington. It's not the first, it's the second. UW is deemed like the more academic school and whatever, it's more prestigious and all that. But I had in-state tuition because I was living in Washington, right? I was a Washington resident. I saved a bunch of money by doing in-state. I learned quite a bit in the business classes there. So I think it's a good advantage and it's a good decision if you're in the US to do in-state schooling, especially for your undergrad. It's important to go to a decent school, so don't just go to like a trash school, because again, you're going to get worse education, worse learning. I think a lot of times it changes the direction that you learn or you end up going career-wise because of the quality of the professors. But I had a great time. I don't think you can replicate that on an online degree. So I know a lot of people are huge into, online learning, it's cheap and all this stuff. I'm very against online degrees. I'm very for online learning. So very two different topics. But there's somewhat of an experience in an adulthood and a growing that you do internally when you're at college on your own. There's no parents, there's no funding. So I didn't have any financial backing and all that. You're an adult, like you just get dropped in. It's amazing though to be in an environment, in a community where everybody's working towards the same thing. So at Washington State University, it's an isolated college town in the middle of a wheat field. Essentially everyone there is to go to school, is a professor, or works for the university in some way, shape, or form. But I really enjoyed the environment, the atmosphere. I think it helped me grow as a person. So no, I don't think you can get that online. I don't think you're going to get all these great benefits of online degrees. I'm not a fan of it. I ended up taking 1 or 2 classes online because of conflicts in my schedule for my undergrad. The online classes were 10 times easier, significantly less work, and more of a joke. So again, this helps form my view of an actual academic institution is giving online versions of classes versus classroom, and I can tell you they're not equivalent. So that was Washington State University. I graduated with a finance degree. I'm continuing to work for a startup company. I don't want to work for the startup company. I want to work on Wall Street. I want to be a trader. I want to get into like the real nitty gritty, high-end money, fancy Wall Streety types of jobs. And so I'm applying and applying and applying, and nobody will hire me. Nobody will consider me for an internship. And yes, I'm applying to like Goldman Sachs, Bank of America, JP Morgan Chase, like Lazards, like anyone and everyone I've already applied to. I think I submitted over 200 applications, wrote my resume, did everything. Could not get a job with a finance degree. I took, though, my last semester a financial engineering course because there was no undergrad degrees at the time. There was just a course that the school offered, and it was taught by one of the PhD students who had a master's already in mathematics from a different university, and she was working on her PhD in finance, and she taught the class, and she did an amazing job. It was just a lot of interesting, I think, applications of math and theory of finance all coming together. And so when I graduated, I was like, this is what I want to do. This is real finance. This is really trading. This is real analytics, right? This isn't this fluffy Excel nonsense I've been learning. And corporate finance is great and it has its own place, but it's not going to be used in the trading and investment world. And so because of that, I kind of realized after all these applications and being underemployed, I guess. I was working for a startup for a year after undergrad, that I wanted to go to grad school. So I applied when I was getting ready to graduate. I got accepted from Washington State University for my master's. To give you an idea here, my GRE scores were so high, they were significantly higher than all the PhDs that were applying for their PhDs at Washington State University. I was the only master's student that had a full ride. They wrote me a really nice letter and said, we'd love for you to stay at Washington State University. Your GRE scores are stellar. You're better than the PhD candidates. We don't offer funding for masters. However, we would offer you a full ride. So I'd have a free master's in economics, applied economics. I thought about it. I heard advice that it's not good to go to the same university, and I knew I wanted to end up in financial engineering or quantitative finance. I didn't think that was the best route. I turned down the offer. I got rejected from all the financial engineering programs, and so I ended up working for a year. At this point, I'm disgruntled with the fact that I have a finance and a business degree, which needs more math, needs more analytics, needs more computer science to do what I really wanted to do. So I don't necessarily blame the business school. This is on me. I didn't realize, a finance degree doesn't get you into quantitative finance, something I think a lot of schools teach and preach, but it's not true. My program didn't teach it or preach it, though. They didn't really care. They were more just teaching general finance. So I ended up applying again the next year, and I ended up getting into Claremont University, or University of Claremont down in California, for their financial engineering program, with the option to do a dual MBA financial engineering degree. The tuition, I think, came in at over $100,000 a year, if I believe. Yeah, over $100,000 for that per year. I'm like, I don't think I've got that much time and money, and it just doesn't seem like a good idea. The University of Michigan accepted me as well, and I ended up going to the University of Michigan. And not surprisingly, at the time, coming from the West Coast, I had no clue that Michigan was like this stellar, top-rated, amazing school. I applied to Columbia, Baruch, Cornell, any of the big names, University of Chicago, for example. I didn't get in, right? I have a finance business background. Like, I'm broken goods. Like, I'm not supposed to be doing math. I have a finance background. And one question a lot of people ask me is, Dimitri, how did you get in then? Right? If you have a finance degree and you always say finance isn't enough, how did you get in? Michigan required a interview video. So the statement of purpose for both of the schools I got accepted to, they wanted very detailed statement of purpose. I essentially wrote my life story explaining that I wanted to work on Wall Street. I wanted to do trading. And at the end of the day, I ended up getting a finance degree, which I realized looking back was a dumb decision. I want to do math, computer programming, and stats. I had experience doing programming at the startup company I was doing, and I was doing analytics there as well. But I wanted to take it to the next level. I wanted to do more math. Michigan, again, made me shoot a video. So I had to awkwardly sit, and I think I have it somewhere. I'm in dress clothes, and I'm as stiff as a board, awkwardly talking about why I want to go to the University of Michigan and why I want to be a financial engineer, essentially. And so they ended up accepting me. Their tuition was $21,000 a semester, so it's $40-something a year. After fees and summer boot camp and all that, my degree cost $70,000. And so I ended up going to the University of Michigan, and I went through the process, started my first semester, vastly unprepared. The summer boot camp was okay, but again, it's hard. It's hard when you come from a finance background. You're not educated. You're not qualified to do the education and learning and processes. You're just super far behind. All my classmates had engineering and computer science and mathematics and stats undergrads, so they had their 4-year degree, specialized in that, and then they were going to build on top of that. I took the first semester, and it was just depressing. I was spending probably 80 hours a week or something just doing school. I hated it. I'd get up, do homework, go to class, come back, eat lunch, do homework, make dinner, whatever, do more homework, meet with friends, study, do more homework. And then I'd go to bed and then get up and do the same thing over and over and over. At the same time, my wife was going for her master's at the University of Michigan. And she was it was difficult, it was challenging, it stretched her, but she enjoyed it. It was fun, it was exciting. Our program was just grinding us into the dirt. They didn't treat us very well. So this program at Michigan no longer exists. This is not the new one, this is an old one. But one interesting fact I took away is all the MBA classes from Michigan, so Ross Business School, were top rated, were top 20 business school, were the exact same classes I took at Washington State University. So business class-wise and quality, you pay for the name and you pay for the networking, but the materials are going to be the same and a lot of the books are the same. Even at a master's level, so an MBA level, are going to be the same as my undergrad. I took those business classes. I got 100% in the class. I've never gotten 100% in a class in anything. A buddy of mine, we ended up winning a trading competition with one of the business classes. Again, we'd both taken classes at random state schools, so not Ivy League or not any fancy business school. And we ended up just blowing out these MBAs out of the water. We blew out all the other financial engineers out of the water. It's a fun experience. But Anyways, back to the education here. It was just a lot of like pressure, and it was overstressed in that first semester. And then the program announced, hey, by the way, there's some feuding and stuff going on between the engineering school and the business school, and we don't want to do this anymore, so we're going to close the program. But no worries, you can finish the program and the degree, and we'll give you the degree and everything. So I'm like, I don't like the program. I don't think it's structured very well. It's pushing definitely me too hard. I'm studying a lot more than everybody else because I'm having to catch up on all the stuff I'm missing, plus doing the normal homework assignments. I just didn't feel that the structure was correct and done right. I didn't think they did the best job at putting the program together. Again, somewhat of a money-making opportunity at that point in time. And so I thought, screw it. If they're going to close the program, there's going to be no more alumni. So no one's going to know who the University of Michigan's program is. I don't like the degree. I'm not doing super well. Again, I'm passing all my classes. Life is fine. But I'm not really learning, and I'm paying to learn. I'm paying to be educated. I'm not paying for the degree. Like, I don't really care about the paper, right? It's nice to have. I definitely need that to get a job. But at the end of the day, I'm trying to get educated. So I looked, and there was an applied economics master's. So they call it an MAE, Master's of Applied Economics. I researched that program. They only had 5 core courses, and everything else could be an elective. I went and met with the director of the program and said, hey, here's the situation. I'm in financial engineering. I don't think I'm getting the most out of it. I'm definitely behind, so I can't blame all of it on the program. I have an economic background as well. You know, this might be a better fit. Would you guys allow me to transfer into the MAE and then allow me to take electives from the financial engineering program? So they looked at it and they said, you know what, that's fine. You can do it. You just have to go through the application process, apply, get transferred over and everything. We don't allow MAE students to take financial engineering courses. However, since you're already enrolled in that program, we will allow you to take whichever electives you want from either program, and you can do that. So I'm like, awesome. This is a deal for me. So I switched over programs. The classes in the MAE were very rigorous still, but they were more reasonable and expected. So the MFE was requiring us to take 6 classes a semester. So for a master's, you typically only take 3 to 4. The MAE was saying, hey, don't take more than 4. Like, this is dumb. You're just going to push yourself too hard. You need to sit down and really take the time and spend 2 years to get a master's. This isn't like a race to do it in a year and a half. So I was like, this is good. I agree. I think the education's better. So I was able to take the core classes from the applied economics program. I thought they were, again, very applicable to financial engineering, quantitative finance, math, stats, again, applied with some economic theory. And then also I was able to take some electives and kind of do a little bit of financial engineering. And the MAE said, by the way, you need to pick a major. So the way the MAE works is the MAE is a degree, so Master's of Applied Economics, and then it's in something. So most of them are in economics or in econometrics or in public policy or in something like that. I asked if I could rig mine up to be in financial engineering. They said yes, but you have to have a minimum of this many courses for it to be considered a major, so your actual degree. So I went through and showed them, these are all the financial engineering courses I've taken. I minimized the amount of finance I took, but this is what I'm taking. And they said, awesome, you can do it. So my degree is technically a Master's of Applied Economics in Financial Engineering through the economics department. I loved it. The students in the MAE program were different students than those in the MFE. They were more laid back, but they had more fun. They were more focused on learning and education and helping each other. And I really enjoyed that camaraderie. Again, I was married, so I didn't spend as much of my time with every other student as many of them did who were single. But I learned a lot. And Michigan was a huge stepping stone for me. The name brand, the applied economics program did a lot for me on the learning side. The quality of the classes, the quality of professors were very good. I can't complain. Yes, there were people I just didn't like individually, but they taught well and things were done at a very rigorous level. So I can't complain too much on that. And that really wrapped up my official education and everything. And then I didn't realize this, so now we're going to talk a little bit about the industry here. I learned far more in the industry than I've learned ever in my academic institutional education. College and universities are designed, and even elementary schools and high schools and all that, are designed to give you the base. After that, right, you have the base, you're specialized after college and grad school. You have to apply it in the real world. You have to do more research. You have to get involved. It takes a lot of learning. This is where I think quants burn out. And this is where I'm going to put this final note here from my education. My education, a lot of it is online learning. So I'll put that in there in air quotes. I do a little bit of learning online. I do a ton of textbook reading. So again, I would consider this more like self-learning. Everything's self-learning after grad school. Talking to other industry professionals, learning from people on the job. Again, reading more textbooks and more textbooks and more textbooks and going back and forth and trying things out. You need to keep driving. And I think this is where a lot of quants or people that go into quantitative finance don't end up making it in the industry. They end up thinking, for example, like they're in junior high or high school and they want to be a quant. And so they burn themselves out with having to get a 4.0 and having to be the very best and having to do the top and having to get the best GRE scores. And I've seen it time and time again. The vast majority of them end up getting through grad school or whatever. They suffered through the whole thing. They don't really enjoy it. They get onto the job. They do the bare minimum. They make the money. They stamp themselves as a quant and they're done. That's pretty boring. Like, that's great that you worked so hard to get to that point, and I'm all about hard work. But if you guys look at my background, and I don't encourage everyone to do it the way I did it, but I was more concerned with education and learning. I wanted to learn more. I wanted to get more involved. When I finished my finance degree, right, I understood that I didn't know enough. I was missing the math and the computer science that I really needed to do the job. And so I kept going to do it. And I'm proud of myself for not sticking with the financial engineering degree because I wasn't learning. So even though I would have gotten the piece of paper at the end, I would have finished it out and said, wow, look, I'm a financial engineer and I finished this degree. I didn't get the education, right? That's what you're paying for. And for me to be successful in my career, I've been successful because I've been learning. I've been focused on trying to figure out how to do things in a practical way. And so the best analogy I can give for quants is being a quant is like a marathon. Okay. A lot of people end up thinking quantitative finance is for those alpha male, I don't know, just really disgusting personalities that are over the top, too intense, overly confident when they don't know anything. They think that's what's going to make a good financial quant because they watch all these dumb Wall Street movies. Those eras are dead and gone. Quant finance is different. It's slow, it's methodical, it's doing analytics, it's digging deep, it's understanding theories. So if you're someone who's introverted or you like to think and you like to do math and you like to do stats and you don't know what you want to do, quant finance is pretty awesome. Especially like I work in risk management, which is slower paced. Now you could work on the trading and the hedge fund side, which I should have mentioned is super fast paced and exciting and it's groundbreaking and everyone's like rushing to do things. But there's a slow part and a fast part. Again, if you like stats and math, this is where you are going to thrive. This is where I love it because I'm always learning and I'm always digging deeper to figure things out. Like I don't understand the world. I need to know. And so that's why quant finance is so amazing. And again, it's this marathon. So I enjoy it. I'm not in a race. I don't need to hurry and get somewhere. I don't need to hurry and get that degree. I'm still learning every day. The industry's advancing. Data science, machine learning is coming on the scene. So now we got to add that into our repertoire here of skills. So you got to get involved. You got to have fun. But in general, I think my education is fairly non-traditional. I don't encourage people to go get a business degree if you want to do quant finance. Do statistics. I think that's the best degree in general to get. Financial engineering is also another good route. Again, just make sure you're getting all the basics and like math and stats that are not just applied to finance, but you need to understand general constructs and theories. An undergrad degree should do better. So I would recommend if you do an undergrad, don't do it in financial engineering. Go out and get like a stats undergrad or math undergrad, and then go into financial engineering masters or get a stats masters, right? You can apply these skills across the board, but really this marathon is long. It's fun. I see people in the industry that do really well, and they're similar to me in the fact that like they're having fun. They go to work, they're excited. Yes, there are days I absolutely hate my job and think it's horrible, but there are also days where it's like I'm just so happy that I'm doing this for a living and I'm getting paid to do it. So when you do education, you do learning. I think the big takeaway here is you don't necessarily have to love the entire process. Learning to love to learn, though, I think is important in life in general. And I think there's too much focus a lot of time on the education systems and a lot of just horrible quality out there that they need to focus on applying it to the real world. If you like to do, for example, like mechanics, you need to understand how engines work, for example. there's science and there's theory behind that they could teach in schools. And yes, you could go out and not go to college and you could be a mechanic or a plumber or an electrician or, I don't know, a salesperson. There's all kinds of jobs out there that you can do that you don't necessarily need a college degree for. I'm not a fan against like elementary school and high school. I think high school specifically I hated because I felt like a lot of it was like required materials that I was not going to use. I ended up using a lot of them, so I can't really complain too much, right? Being a kid, it's hard to see the big picture. But at the same time, looking at the skill set, doing what you enjoy doing, I think is what makes college so rewarding. So if you're not sure if you want to go to college, go out there, look at a few different career paths, degrees, read a bit, see if you think it's exciting, and then kind of go with that. So that's kind of the overview, guys, of my education and my process. I hope I didn't bore you too much with this, but many of you have been requesting I talk more about my path and who I am. So anyways, thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And as always, until next time.